My name is Rick Revelle. I'm a native Canadian of Algonquin ancestry, and I'm reading for World Read Aloud Day. My book is called I Am Algonquin. It takes place in the 1320s in the Ottawa Valley, and I'm proud to say is published by the largest wholly owned Canadian publishing company in Canada, Dundurn Press. Today I'm going to read to you a couple chapters, and hopefully you'll like my book enough to go out and read it. I woke up with the stark realization that I was in unrecognizable surroundings. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was and why I was there. My small hunting party and I were 6 days into a trip north to find game. We had built a small cedar enclosure for the evening, and this is where I awoke. The shelter was made entirely of cedar boughs and small saplings used to hold the boughs in place. And just a word of explanation, the story is being told by a Algonquin warrior, Mahanigan. With 5 warriors, 2 young boys, and 3 animushes, which are dogs, the body heat and small fire kept us very warm. We had built 5 of these along the way, and some would serve us on the return trip for shelter. The winter was starting out to be one of hunger for the Amawini, which are the Algonquins. Very little snow made the hunting of the moles, moose, and the Wawashkishi deer difficult for us. Without deep snow to slow the animals down and tire them out, we were having a grueling time trying to hunt them with our lances and arrows. The decision had been made among 5 family units that we would each provide a hunter to go in the direction of Kabonaka, god of the north wind, and the land of the Nipissing to find game. There the snow would be deeper and the game would not escape us as readily. In the summer, all the Algonquin family units come together and hunt, fish, collect berries, nuts, and fruit, and live in a large village. This is to provide protection against our enemies, who find it easier in the summer to raid, and it gives us a chance to trade and plan for the future. In the winter, we must split into the smaller family units because many of the animals have gone to sleep in their dens, and the ice covers the lakes and streams, making the fish hard to get to. With the smaller family units, we ensure that we won't overhunt an area, whereas a larger village would decimate the game in no time. This winter, though, the snows were late and my people were starting to feel hunger pains. A scarce diet of vegetable, squirrel, and waboose rabbit did not keep the hunger at bay for long. If we had to eat our berries and other reserves without the meat we needed, starvation would not be far behind. After waking, we started on our way. It was very cold, and the sundogs were warning us of colder weather. We could hear the loud cracking of the trees in the forest as the frost started to do its work. With my fur hat, heavy mitts, fur robes, and moccasins, I was starting to work up a sweat with our quick pace. However, my face could feel the sharpness of the Kibonkanaka's breath, and I would soon have to put a scarf of Ajadamo across my face. My companions were all bundled up like myself, and we carried our lances in our hands, using them for support in the rough terrain. Our bows were slung over our backs with our arrow quivers, as well as our agamat, which are snowshoes that we used for the deep snow. Our knives and clubs were tucked into our leather belts. My 2 brothers, Kag, which is porcupine in Algonquin, and Wagoosh, which is fox, were with me. Kag was a fierce warrior and had a dent in his head from a Haudenosaunee Iroquois war club from many years ago. The wound had long since healed, but he still suffered at times from unexplained head pain. My other brother was younger than Kag and me. Wagoosh was a good tracker and hunter, but he had yet to be tested in battle. The other 2 hunters were married to our sisters. Moose was a large man who carried 3 lances and no arrows. Mons lost his 2 fingers on his right hand next to his thumb in a battle with the Nipissing. Without these fingers, Mons could not draw a bowstring, but he was very expert with the lance in war and hunting. The last hunter, Magua, Bear always walked as the rear guard of our column and was forever vigilant. Magua was not from our tribe, the river people. He was from the Saganangawak people of the lake. Magua was the eldest and a veteran warrior and hunter. Also with us were Keg's twin sons, who were close to leaving their childhood and had not yet been given a warrior's name. They were Agwingos, which is chipmunk, and Esteban, raccoon. Agwingos and Esteban were responsible for collecting firewood, tending the fire, looking after the dogs, and learning all they could. The dogs were brought along to help run down any game we found, to guard the camp, and to help carry back what we had killed using a travois, and when we had enough for our needs. As a last resort, the dogs were also used for food if our hunt turned out to be unsuccessful. On our 6th day of walking, we came upon a deer that had fallen through the ice along the shore of a small lake, enabling us to slay it without much effort. Our hope was Nokoma's Earth Mother would supply us with more than this small doe. After thanking Nokomis for the deer, we dressed it and hung it in a large tree out of sight. We were starting to get nervous as we traveled farther north, because at the best of times, the Nipissing people were not tolerant of anyone hunting in their lands. The day was getting colder and the snow was getting deeper. This cheered us up. With deep snow, our chances of finding and killing any large game increased greatly. We were now wearing our agamak and making good time. We had been keeping in the woods along a small river, partly for concealment and also to stay out of the biting wind. When the sun was high, we stopped to eat. Agwigos and Esteban had a fire going, and we roasted on sticks some of the deer that we had earlier killed. Melting snow on a piece of bark out above the fire gave us water to drink, and we were soon on our way again. Soon after our departure, the dogs got a scent of something, and Wagoosh from fresh signs of a big Ayala Mons bull moose. This large animal would sustain our families for a long time. We picked up our pace, and the dogs were running and howling with the excitement of the hunt. Agwigos and Esteban were straining to keep up with us, and we soon came out into a clearing where fires years ago had destroyed the trees. There we saw that the moose was struggling to get through the entanglement of downed trees and deep snow. The large Miskino Anamoosh, the red dog, had him by the rear leg, and the moose kicked him off a couple of times before the other two dogs reached the prey. Both went for the moose's head. The smallest of the three was clamped onto the nostrils, and the bull was violently shaking his head and bellowing, trying to disengage him. The more the moose shook, the deeper the piece of Anamoosh with the small dog clamped onto the nostrils. The small dog was covered with blood and froth from the bull. The Bavnagadagawa Anamoosh, which is a white dog, had been caught by the large antlers and was thrown about 25 feet by the massive neck strength of the animal. As she hit the ground, a large gush of air could be heard leaving her body, accompanied by a shrill yelp. The dog was up immediately, rushed by the bull, and clamped onto the large neck with a renewed viciousness. The snow around the big bull and the dogs were red with blood from the four animals. The sound of the dogs barking and the moose bellowing threw bumps into my skin. There was nothing like the thrill of a hunt to make me feel like my blood had been given a sudden rush through my body. Mons was running ahead of the rest of us towards the death struggles of the dogs and moose. In quick succession, he hurled two of his lances into the back of the bull. We loosed our arrows, and the big moose started to falter. With the dogs upon him, the lances, and 10 arrows around him, he was on his knees. He was still bellowing and fighting off the dogs, but his lifeblood was slowly leaving him. By now we had drawn our clubs. Avoiding his huge swinging antlers, we started hitting him on the head, crushing his skull. Within minutes, the huge animal let out of a sudden rush of air from his lungs, causing blood to run from both his nostrils and mouth. This was his final act. We all thanked Nokomis for this gift to her children and started cutting. The warmth of the bulls inside after we had started to butcher him helped keep our hands warm. The dogs were rewarded with the intestines, and Mons was given the heart. And he was the first to strike. Gag and I worked on cutting around the head and legs to peel off the hide. Gwingos and Esteban were given the job of removing the lances and arrows from the carcass. They also had the job of cutting the horns off, which would be used to make fish, hooks, arrow, and lance heads, and other weapons. The women would also make utensils out of the huge rock. Our people would use every piece of meat, bone, and hide that we could carry back from this giant of the forest. Wagush and Magua had gone into the woods to cut small trees down so we could make Pimanat Dabajigan travel for the dogs and Autobanaks toboggans to transport the moose back to our village. We used pieces of this hide to hold the meat on the travois. With the extra weight of the bull and the dole, our return trip home would take 3 days longer. Sounds carry a long distance in the wintertime, and I was worried that the echoes of this kill would bring unwanted attention from any nipissing in the area. As these thoughts went through my mind, the small dog stuck his head in the air, and I could see his nostrils flare. Then he started to growl. Looking in the direction that he was pointed, I realized my worst fear. And our guest today, that's Tucker, the Wonder Hound.